Josh, I'm excited to talk, and like I mentioned before we started rolling, that this is like Quantum Leap, and I really enjoy just being able to jump into someone else's career for 45 minutes, and then, when that's exactly probably how long an episode is, so this is pretty much correct. But where I want to start, and thanks again for joining, is really just that brand creator partnership where the opportunities lie, where the pain points might be, what's good, what's bad, what's new.
Yeah, so as a former manager who is not a manager any longer, it has been very fascinating to be in it, but also outside of it, working with my clients on the brand side, but also on the creator side. And I've always seen a big disconnect when it comes to creator partnerships and the opportunities. And there's legitimate arguments on both sides, but I think one of the big things is brands understanding the ROI for doing a campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And creators understanding the ROI for doing a campaign. And there's so many different metrics and different ways that people are choosing to measure what success is, that every single brand deal or campaign is measured in a completely different way. And
Yeah.
if you were to do a traditional ad, and you look at the brand lift and you look at all those, that's great. But that doesn't translate to creators in the same way that it would translate in a traditional ad. And I think what I've seen is when a brand and a creator come together and really are aligned, then you get to see the actual magic happen. But I'll give you the example of, a lot of when I was a manager, a lot of brands would come in saying, hey, here's the creative, here's the brief, here's the story, just do this. And then we want rounds of notes on this and this and this and this.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we got to the money part, there were all of these calculations on what the creator, what this brand partnership was worth. And what always fascinated me was the idea behind the value of eyeballs that it was getting to, because that's important, that reach. But even more importantly, how it was measured, which was usually like in a 28-day, snapshot. And there was a lot of expectation for moving SKUs. Mm-hmm. Well, this many people didn't sign up. This might be, and I was like, okay, that's legit. But if we were going to go in that model, we sort of have to look at the video that's being put out there by a creator doesn't get deleted after 28 days.
Correct.
Right? And counting SKUs and counting how many products were sold is really hard when that product could be, that person could click on a link 2 years down the road. And so a lot of times brands talk about brand awareness, right? Having a creator tell a really great story and integrate the brand into that story is extremely valuable, and it creates brand awareness perpetuity worldwide, mm-hmm. all media. There's nowhere else. You can't do that on any other platform. You can't do it on TV. You can't do it anywhere else except for working with creators or creating your own content. And so the question then comes up is, well, what's the value to that? How do we measure that? What is the ROI? And so you have, I think there's a lot of people who have tried to figure out formulas of the CPMs and the RPMs and the click-through rates and trying to grasp and understand what of the value is. And so I think there's a major disconnect a lot of the times between what the brand wants, which is moving product, and what the creator wants is telling a really good story.
Yeah, because to kind of interject, if whatever metric you create, right, will then dictate what kind of content you get. If you apply a direct response offer to that content, right, you are then incentivizing and motivating the content creator to create something that is probably divergent from what they normally do. And I think there's yes, by all means, we have to measure this somehow, or else what is the point of doing it? And how do we even get the project off the ground on the brand side? But this starts to kind of go into brand sentiment and all the monitoring tools and PR that are used, because it's not programmatic advertising. And I think one of the things that's really interesting to me is when you think of a creator, one of the things I would think about the most as a brand, tell me if I'm off, it's not just how, if I'm starting the conversation, it's not so much how much reach you have now, but it's also how much reach would it be when you do an ad. You almost want to know, because I think there's a lot of times where sometimes the pull, and pull is a term I'm going to use probably often in this podcast, is the amount of pull you have with that audience. Because as somebody who has both been on the brand side and as a creator myself, I know that as a creator, and I've done brand deals, there's certain things that would be disingenuous. Like I cannot do certain things and my audience will go, yes. But there's certain things where it would work, right? So there has to be kind of alignment with product and or service and the content you make. And so I can very much, start to have the wheels turning in my head of the brand that goes, well, but you have 1 million followers and you tend to get X amount of views on your videos. Why did people not watch this one? And the creator easily going, well, yeah, because
I don't
nobody expects
it.
me to do this. Nobody expects me to do this.
I've had plenty of brands, whether brands hire me as a consultant or as a coach, to figure out how to work with creators, or on the creator side, I've been like, okay, well, we're going to ask for guaranteed views. And I'm like,
tough.
Okay. I was like, well, do you have a line item in there for it? Because we're not going to guarantee that.
Oh, fascinating.
Because we'll buy. You can buy they're empty. In my opinion, they're empty calorie views.
Correct.
They don't really mean much. But if that's what you want to see, then great. Put a line item in. We'll tell you what the ad buy is and do it. So there is what I think there's a disconnect on, you, Jeff, you don't have control how many people are going to watch your video.
No.
The only
I have a likely idea, but yes, you are correct.
Right. So having creators set up for, it has to hit this many views. There's step deals in place. There's all of this, and it gets so murky and mucky and confusing. And all the creator wants to do is tell a great story. Mm-hmm. And all the brand wants to do is get their brand out there. And you go, okay, well, this isn't rocket science. But what it comes down to is understanding both parties and what they're trying to get out of it. And I think one of the most important points is that when I've been negotiating as a manager, but also advising with brands, was if you reach out to a creator and you want them to do a brand deal with you, do not give creative notes. It is okay. Yeah. It is in the deals that I did. I said, listen, as a manager, rounds of notes. You get maybe one or two. I mean, it was unheard of to do rounds of notes. Usually that costs more. Also, the rounds of notes, if you're going to put a stipulation on the creator that they need to have a turnaround time of 2 days, well, brand, you need to have do that as well. You need to turn
Mm-hmm.
it. But the way that it was shaped was the creator knows how to tell the story better than you. That's why you're coming to them. So
Amen.
if you are going to entrust a creator to make sure that they have all the talking points, leave it alone, because as soon as you start mucking around with the creative and we don't like how you said this and that, you're dead in the water. So what I've always advised to do is, and this has been in the agreements, is the scope of feedback that brands have are if a creator says something that is inaccurate and that could hurt the brand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Period. End of sentence. Otherwise, you don't get any notes on it. And so some really smart brands get it,
Right.
and some don't, because this isn't getting all of these salient points across. And I've seen it again and again, and it works when you give the creator the idea.
It all comes back to the first thing you said there, which is that you are reaching out to the creator because they can tell a better story and they have a better audience or a more engaged audience.
Yeah.
And I agree completely with that. There's this there's this friction that you don't want to create as a brand, right? And there's this trust that you want to have as a creator, right? You don't want a ton of feedback, but you also, don't want to it goes both ways, right? You do not want to make a brand feel uneasy about being able to work with you, right? You want to create more of these deals, so you're going to be hopefully, theoretically, amenable to all of these scenarios. I have a premise. I'm going to throw it at you, and because I don't see enough of it, I think this would be beneficial. You tell me if I'm wrong. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What I've noticed in navigating some of this for brands and myself is that it's always easier to do the seventh thing with a brand rather than the first thing. So the more consistently you engage with people, there is an exponential value of engaging with the same creators. And what you talked about is that long tail of content, right? So if people tend to start knowing the creator synonymously with the brand, then that creates a perpetual value. Like, I would argue right now that people know that Travis Kelce is an Experian spokesperson. Therefore, that drives more for Experian overall, because now they've made the connection. So now every time they see Travis Kelce, then they think about Experian. And then they're like, oh, I've got to apply for a smart money debit card.
Jeff, it's trust.
Yeah.
It's trust. Because if you look at if we get into like the really nerdy, I don't know how nerdy, like film stuff, when we watch TV or movies, it's third person. It's voyeuristic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Except there are a few shows that the actor will turn to the camera and talk to you, and it's jarring, right? They're breaking the fourth wall, is what it's called.
Oh, yeah.
And it's extremely powerful. Creators are breaking the fourth wall in all of their videos. It's very rarely third person. And so the intimate connection, and I've seen it, that a creator has with the audience is something that money can't buy. And that's what you're tapping into when you're doing a brand deal. Can we get a creator that aligns with our values, and the values align with the organization, to have their audience trust them to say, I'm endorsing this product? And the best way to do that is through story. And through story that is engaging and natural and doesn't feel invasive. no one
Ideally.
does that better than the creator.
It is incredibly, you hit it. It is incredibly hard to break the fourth wall and not only capture but maintain someone's
Mm-hmm.
attention, right? So I think of Ferris Bueller or House of Cards, or there's a
Yep.
bajillion different examples of this, right? Um, it's that ability to just, you know,
Yep.
create that bond or scare the crap out of people, I guess, in House of
Yeah,
Cards.
yeah, yes, and that's the piece that I think I want all the brands to hear and the creators to hear, is that that's the don't try all the different points in front of this is how much it's worth, this is what we're negotiating. You're chipping away at the trust that you have with the creator and the brand and that
Yep.
relationship, which makes it even harder to have a really great campaign because the trust isn't there.
And I think of this from the lens of a creator, right? I would much rather know that I might be building a consistent long-term relationship because, cool, that lets me know that I don't have to kind of be out there. And most creators don't get into the business of wanting to sell themselves constantly for, you're in a lucky select few if you get to do it, and it's awesome. But it probably wasn't like contract negotiation probably wasn't in the fine print and wasn't on the brochure and wasn't something you were thinking about. That said, you are now there. And so, like anything, if you can create consistent things where you don't have to be constantly out there selling and closing, that's wonderful. And also, yes, it's that trust and that relationship where, if you feel comfortable with that brand, hopefully there is some latitude provided, right, that allows you to grow with it, to make suggestions, to even come to them with the creative and say, I think this is going to work based on the body of work that I've done, based on what we've done in the past. Let's try this. The more you can allow the creator into the process, the more they're going to want to be in the process, obviously. Not to say that you can't do something ad hoc. It's just, I find it such a flawed exercise. And like, we're going to reach out. We're never going to talk to you for 9 months. We're going to reach out again. It's just like, you got to start the process all over again.
We're going to reach out. You didn't respond because it's a canned email. We're going to reach out the next day, saying, bumping this to the top of your inbox. We're going to reach out 2 days later, and then 3 days later, and then 4 days later, email. And then right, and I see it all the time, and I have clients on both sides saying, the creators going, why are they doing this? And then the brands are saying, why aren't they responding?
Well, and also I would think you would advise never negotiate from a point of urgency. If you can be talking with a lot of lead time, it allows you a lot more leeway.
Well, I mean, yeah, but also looking at the economic stuff of, Q. We know Q4 is the big one, but when I talk to brands, we're looking to build long-lasting relationships.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a one-off, look somewhere else, because it is about building that relationship and building the that you have with the creator that then gets that 7 points super quick.
Yep.
So I think if brands can start to have their teams really build relationships or learn how to work with creators, because creators are their own unique animal. It goes such a long way, and you don't have to work as hard to spam so many people to close the deals. If you know how to talk to creators, if you know how to work with the managers or the agents, the amount of time that you are going to be sending out emails that get nothing in return is going to diminish, because you're going to continue to build a roster of trusted ambassadors that want to continue to promote your product. and may even promote it without you paying for it because they're so happy with it.
Possibly it's the dream on the brand side. Wouldn't advise it on the creator side. Always know your worth. But yes, it's I was thinking about this, and I'm gonna paraphrase Brian Klaas in his new book, and he was on Derry Thompson's show, but he talked about how it's like if you see something that's effective and then you copy it, you are chasing mediocre because you can't replicate. You can't replicate the last thing that was successful. You have to do something divergent, different the next time. So I think there's often the case where it's like, hey, this was great. Now do it for us. And it's like, no, that doesn't, that may or may not work. But I think, so like, for example, I mean, there might be somebody that's like, okay, we deeply want to exactly embody and duplicate what was done with Stanley water bottles. Mm-hmm. Well, you can't. That was kind of born out. That wasn't born out of Stanley. That was born out of a few bloggers in Utah that really, in a couple viral moments on TikTok, and then their push and their ingenuity to want to take that further. So you can't. I mean, you can learn from these things, right? You can learn from these examples about how these partnerships may work. But it's like when I was working in experiential, and people were like, "Hey, can you do the next ice bucket challenge?" I'm like, "No, there is no next ice bucket challenge. There will be another moment of virality, but there will never be another ice bucket challenge, nor should there be. Like that is not the point. The point is that some principles of basic human psychology can be applied. And certainly some things work better than others. And you are absolutely right on one other thing, too. You want to try and make success less about chance and, predict it more. Have a group of people who can seed content for you, because that's going to at least create a baseline that will allow you to, you can't hit X or Y, but if you have people engaged, you're going to at least hit some certain level of success on your posts or on your campaign or anything else. That was one of the funniest things I encountered early on, and this was people like, if they went on stage and they said, well, there's nothing you can do to predict virality. It's just, it's just a feeling, and sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. And I'd be like, I wonder if this is what we do in our field, where we try and fake humility, or if that's actually the thought, because I agree in some regard, but if you're not seeding content and having people involved, you're leaving it completely up to chance, and that sounds terrifying, and I don't like it.
Yeah, but that's this business is chance. It is. Okay.
Dang it!
It's. I know. Sorry, man.
You're not soothing anything for me, Josh.
No,
like, oh,
listen,
no.
As an executive coach and a coach, a lot of people expect me to, be like rah go you, and I'm like, listen. Sometimes my job is to sometimes tell you when the baby's ugly.
Ooh, that's good. That's good. I like that.
And because there's not enough people out there just telling the truth and being really honest, because everyone's dependent on somebody else for that paycheck. And I think that to sort of encapsulate this, like this is a business, right? The AORs, the brands, the agencies, the creators, these are businesses. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have money, you don't have a business.
Yep.
Period. And so it is not lost on me, for anybody who's listening, that I'm not in some woo-woo la-la land of like, oh, just kumbaya and have feelings and make sure creators are happy and creators are happy. No, money needs to you need to make money. And I think that is one of the things that gets in the way of creativity.
Yeah.
And that's where the real conflict is.
Like when you hear the term KPI, do you just know, oh, creativity is going to die?
I usually will ask, why is that so important?
Yes. Why so serious?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, because when you get it, you understand intimately that the person at the brand. This is okay. Now I'm not on a literal soapbox. I'm just still in my chair. But this is the thing that I want
I
people to.
did before we started. I did see you sit on a soapbox, which you could get sponsored if you like. We're like, hey, hashtag Dove. But
I
hey,
feel we've had them on.
there you go.
I think
They
one of the
should be
things.
sending you boxes for you to sit on.
Be a lot of
Soapboxes.
boxes. It'd be a lot of
I
boxes, but I'm into it.
listen, Brandale. I had to
I
take
like
my
no, I
manager
like
hat.
no. I like it. This is. I like being derailed, but what I think. I may have completely lost my train of thought. Josh, I lost it. What was
Sorry.
I talking about?
Soap
No,
boxes. As we
no.
were talking about
There's stuff.
money as well as brands understanding that KPIs. We were talking about.
Oh, say less. Okay, so I might leave that in. I don't know, but the one of the things when you're a brand versus an agency person in PR, and I'll only speak to what I know and what I don't know, but in PR, there's a difference. The agency person is trying to do the most to accentuate things, to push the brand, to get the brand out. And the brand PR person is there to defend the brand, to make sure that the brand doesn't do something dumb, to make sure that all of these KPIs are met, that they can navigate all the internal stuff so that, one of the things it took me a second in my career, but I started to figure it out as an agency person, is that I didn't need to work against and in friction with the brand person. Once I understood, I'm like, I get why you're here. I get what you're doing. It is valid. I understand it. And I won't work, to counter that. So once I know what you're trying to achieve, I'll go, okay. So let me come into the meeting and go, first off, here are the 3 things I know we're not going to do. So rest assured, we're not going to do this. Tell me a little bit more about what we can and cannot do so we can have that conversation. And then hopefully at the end of it, you feel comfortable. And I have somehow kind of, before they can even give their objections or, interject into the process, I've like, all of your frequently asked questions are solved. Now let's get to the creative. And over time, that's just a thing you learn to kind of navigate things better. It's just understanding. But KPIs or metrics or measuring tools or vanity metrics are a lot of times where, good content goes to die. Josh, to pivot, and you gave me a segue a long time ago and I missed it. How did you get into navigating this middle space of a creator coach? I am fascinated. I want to know more.
All right, so I'll give you the Cliff Notes version.
Perfect.
I was lucky enough worked in the entertainment industry. 2013, I was lucky enough to work on the official daily show of YouTube called YouTube Nation. And this was a joint venture between Jeffrey Katzenberg, DreamWorks Animation, and YouTube. And the whole idea behind it that was Jeffrey's, thought was there's so many hidden gems out there that we don't get to see. So we should surface those. And YouTube was all in, and I was myself and my boss Brian Potter, who's a very dear friend of mine and who's one of the top rights and clearance guys in LA. And I was doing rights and clearance at the time. My job, we had 40 people. We had 5 people watching YouTube 10 hours a day. We had an editorial team, and my job was to reach out to work with YouTube, to work with all the creators, all the MCNs, all the third-party claims, all the multinational corporations, to feature 15 seconds of their video in the daily show, saying, "Hey, this is somebody that we want to take the big YouTube spotlight and shine it on." And I had no idea who I was emailing, and I remember it was Hank Green was one of the first people, and I'm just clicking away, right? Casey Neistat, like you name it. And
Yeah.
people were like, do you know who you're talking to? And I was like, I have no idea. And some of these people were huge then and they're huge now, and some weren't big then and are huge now, and some are in the opposite direction. And I became friends with all of these creators because I never asked for anything because I didn't know who they were.
Yeah.
But I fell in love with it. I went to school for journalism, to be in front of the camera, hard news. And this was my form of journalism.
Yeah.
And after that, I did a few other things, and I was on I had a few creators, not after YouTube Nation, after another job asked me to manage them, two people. And I was good at negotiating, and I was like, I don't know, sure. And I was on a podcast, and I ended up asking, the person asked what do creators need to know, and I was like, get a lawyer, this, all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And then he threw a question at me that I wasn't expecting, and he asked me if my roster was full. Jeff, I didn't know what a roster was.
Yeah.
So I said, yeah, because I had no idea what it was. And I thought that was.
I don't want to sound small. Yeah.
Right. Well, no, I didn't even realize. It wasn't even that kind of marketing pivot. It was like, is your roster full? And I didn't want to sound stupid and say, what's a roster? So I just said, yeah. I mean, it was like that quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that podcast dropped on like the first day of VidCon, whatever year I was there. And I was at VidCon to see my friends.
I get where this is going. Yes.
And the podcast went baby viral. Not like, I mean, like baby. And so I was there to literally just see my friends, and all of my friends who were these creators were coming up to me being like, you started a management company? And I was like, not that I'm aware of. And they're like, will you manage me? And I was like, no, I'd rather be your friend. But this happened for 3 days straight. And I went back every night. I went back to the hotel room. I like started doing the math, and I was like, oh, maybe there's something here. And so I started Jay-Z Management, and I quickly actually then had a full roster.
You manifested it.
I guess so. But the important piece to this is that my clients came to me. I never went out and looked for clients. And one of my mentors is Courtney Carter, who is Liza Koshy's manager at Carter Media Group, one of the best people in the entire world. And she was instrumental in helping me introduce me to brands and AORs. I mean, she was wonderful. And one of the things that I realized was that as a manager, I wasn't really enjoying myself because I wasn't going out looking for the next it creator, because that's not what I was interested in.
And you're not Scooter Braun. Yes.
You know, Scooter, right? And and I also, and listen, I'm just being real honest here, is, you know, management is extremely capitalistic, right? So like, and not knocking it. But for me, I wasn't interested in finding the next it person and promising them everything under the sun. And then when they didn't make me money, drop them.
Yeah. That seems disingenuous. Yeah.
That's the business.
Right. But it's not the business that you feel the gravitational pull toward.
Right. So I was like, I'm not going out looking for these it next, you know, these it people, which, you know, great. And there were clients that weren't making me money that I was still helping. And I was like, this is a bad business model for me. And at the same time this was happening, I had friends of mine reaching out to me saying that they were feeling burnt out. These were creators.
Yeah.
And I was like,
That's
huh.
real.
And so I was just giving them advice, and I wrote an article on LinkedIn. It's still up there, where I, as a manager to other managers, saying, "Hey, there's something called burnout. I'm hearing a lot about it. We got to get together as managers and help each other out with this." Jeff, nobody read the article. I mean, like a few people read it, but it just nobody read it. And you fast forward maybe a few months, and that's when there is that tsunami of publications talking about creator burnout. And every article, which they were phenomenal articles, I got more and more irritated because the articles were mostly profiling what had happened, and that was it. And I was at breakfast with Courtney, and I was just sort of on a rant about it. And I said, and I just sort of snapped, and I said, I can't take this anymore. I said, these articles are showing these amazing storytellers and profiling them, but no one's giving them a solution. I'm going to be the solution, and I'm going to be the first ever certified coach dedicated to creators and burnout. Now, Courtney stopped eating, and she had her fork, and she put it down, and she looked at me, and she goes, "You just found a white space in a very crowded market."
Yeah. Dramatic
Now,
pause was necessary there.
oh yeah, because when Courtney says that, you listen. And so that's at the moment that I decided that I wanted to do this. Now, coaching, Jeff, is not a regulated industry. So good news and bad news. Good news,
Yes.
not regulated. Bad news, not regulated. Okay? So anyone can call themselves a coach. However, there is a governing body called the ICF, the International Coaching Federation. And they are the gold standard. They've been around 25 plus years.
Yep.
And they are the ones that are ethics and credentials and credentialing schools. And if any coach wants to work in a Fortune 500, they have to be ICF certified. And I thought about this, and I said, you know what? If I'm going to help this community that I absolutely love, I need to, ethically for me, I need to do this the right way. And so I went back to school for 2.5 years to get certified.
Wow.
As a coach. Now, with that being said, there are some great coaches out there that are not certified. Phenomenal.
Yeah.
And there are some certified coaches that are horrible.
Yep.
Okay.
Go both ways.
It can go both ways. But I knew that for me, and that it was important to have the education and to know the difference between therapy and consulting and coaching and what I was supposed to do and wasn't supposed to do for a community that impacts hundreds of millions, if not billions of people. And so I started out with Creator Coach and Burnout. And we fast forward to this is not the Cliff Notes version, but I will make it a little bit shorter.
I actually love the deep irony in this, that we're the Shorty Awards, and we're going a long time on this. Okay. I love it.
Perfect. All right. So I ended up going to Playlist Live. This was 2019. And I was on a few panels, and there's sort of a theme that runs through my life of like, it's way before it started at YouTube Nation, of like, they're like, do you know who you're talking to? And I was like, no, I don't. I just treated them as a person. And I was on some panel, and this guy had said to me, he goes, there's a reporter here that you need to talk to. I think she'd be really interested in what you're doing. I said, oh, what's her name? And they said Taylor Lorenz, when she was at the New York Times. Jeff, I didn't know who Taylor was.
I would have pretended like I didn't know who Taylor was, but I would have known.
Okay, well, I had no idea.
Love it. It does give you an advantage, right?
Right. I didn't know what a roster was. I didn't know what right. So Taylor and I Taylor did interviewed me, and then the pandemic hit. And April 2020 came around, and the article dropped. And it went. They first put it on they put it digitally, and then they put it on Instagram, and then they put it on what was Twitter, and then it went into the print edition of the New York Times, the Sunday print edition of the New York Times, in the style section, which I have no business being in, but that's where I was in a 2-page spread at the bottom.
Section doesn't matter as long as you get in. That is my motto.
Exactly. And so it was like being strapped to a rocket, and because here's the thing, not many creators read the New York Times, but I'll tell you who does. Boards, CEOs, founders, and everyone in between. So overnight, my business went from creators and creators dedicated, a coach being dedicated to creators and burnout, to now I'd say 50% of my business is Fortune 5, 10, 50 companies at the board and C-suite.
Yeah.
Startups, founders, nonprofits, celebrities, you name it. And then 50% are creators. And then there are organizations that bring me in to do trainings, to do group coaching, so the business has sort of just taken off. But at the ethos, at the core of this, is that everybody's creative.
Yeah.
And you have to be creative in your job. So it doesn't really matter if you are, there's different tactics, right? But so my coaching and where it is now and is, working with creators and executives and everyone in between, helping them tell their story and strategically tell it, because every brand has a story to tell. Every company has a story to tell. And the way you do that is through people.
I mean, storytelling is universal, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of my mentors has a blog called "Everything Is Marketing." And he's probably not wrong.
Yeah.
But there's I have a fascination, but there's one thing I want to pull out of that entire story. It is this, and I think you absolutely nail the ethos and how you get there, and that there's an empathetic version of yourself that is like, you know what, this isn't for me, but this is, and this is where you want to be. But there's a pivot point in what you're talking about where a different person is unwilling to make the pivot. A different person is scared to make the pivot, or scared to jump on the rocket ship, as you describe it, right?
I didn't even know it was a rocket ship, so
that helps, right? But
it does.
There's a, for a lot of us, there's a fear of failure, there's rigidity, there's wanting to stick to one plan. And I haven't really, fully fleshed out this idea, but I think there are probably 5 to 10 inflection points in our life, in our career, at which you can either jump on the rocket ship or you can stay where it's safe and consistent. What I've noticed is there is a prevalence to, even if it's just, not knowing where it's going to go next, right? Not knowing the full picture, but there is a willingness to go into the unknown. Right? Sorry if I just invoked Frozen for people. I'm so sorry if you have kids. But being able to go there, right, is a skill in and of itself, right? To be willing to pivot, to be willing to allow yourself that space, that is a skill. That's just something I wanted to point out to everyone who may have made that connection or may have been listening, that I think that's super valuable. And that's a skill that you can then apply to a lot of things. And then there's this other little, smaller and funnier skill, which is just like, you don't know what you don't know. And it can be dangerous, but it can also be beneficial if you're not, you don't have a preconceived notion, you're not starstruck, and you can just have a conversation with anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is you just have to let it go. I had to say that for the Frozen piece.
I vote Frozen 2, you vote Frozen 1.
Exactly, right. there is a lot. There's fear of failure. There's actually fear of success.
Yeah.
There is a ton of different things, and it affects everybody. And the way that I look at my business and my responsibility to creators as well as brands and organizations is, how do we get the story out there, and tell it in a way that is motivating and inspiring, whether that's with the creator or with the board, making sure that they have the board put together correctly, and the vision, the mission, the strategic plan, and the values, and making sure that the organization is set up in a way that breeds innovation, especially for organizations that work with creators. But it's universal, and there's this really fascinating connection point that I feel very fortunate that I've been able to be at, is that people will talk to me, and they'll say things to me that they won't say to anybody else, whether it's a CEO or a creator or a well-known author, or you name it. And there's a through line to all of it, which is, it's a lonely place at the top.
Yeah. I was going to mention that I always think of it in terms of creators. That I probably mentioned on this podcast multiple times, that burnout is directly related to, you get the dopamine rush, you want the dopamine rush again. You keep seeking it out. One of the things I'm contemplating as you're talking about is, yes, there's universality to it, where the CEO isn't seeking out, click rate and subscribe, but they're still seeking out some version of positive reinforcement. The brand person, anybody, we're all seeking some version that we've experienced before, a positive reinforcement that is a dopamine rush that we want.
Well, but yeah, but Jeff, if you look at a creator who's really made it, right? Who are they supposed to turn to? Because
that's lonely.
It's because as they've become bigger and bigger, and usually they didn't choose this, it was a hobby or a thing that they liked, and it blew up, and now people are coming out of the woodwork. You don't know who you can trust, who's using you for money, who's using you for money you think you have, who's using you to grow their account, and then you're surrounded by yes people. So you start to insulate. Yeah. And at the same time, let's pivot to the CEO.
Same.
CEO can't go to the board with their problems.
Nope.
And they can't go to the people underneath them. So who are they supposed to go to?
Yeah, other CEOs, but that's tricky too.
Well, make sure it's not a competitor.
Well, I was going to say, there's just it's both true, but also inherent that you don't want, at that level, you do not want to show weakness. And as much as we talk about vulnerability should not be weakness, and that we should be more vulnerable and we should be more open, there is a reality that this world's competitive.
Yeah, it's extremely competitive. Whether it's in the digital landscape or in corporate, it's extremely competitive. And I think there's the difference. One of the differences in the digital space is there's no off button.
Yeah.
That's where the burnout comes from. Because if you stop,
it stops.
It stops. Because the creator is the business and the business is the creator. Yeah. And it's blended unlike any other profession I've ever seen. And when you are the brand, when you, the person, are the brand, you can't turn off. And it is it no matter what. And
Yeah.
that is not sustainable, because I
Yeah.
get it all the time from creators of like, I've, they're beating themselves up because they've burnt out. And I was like, or I will have an organization a brand come to me, or a manager, or somebody come to me and say, these people just these creators, they just burn out and they disappear. And I
Hmm.
go, I was like, I don't know about that, but they have the same expectation. A lot of brands have the same expectation that they do of the people that work at the brands. And I say, just
Yeah.
hold on a second. Or traditional. I was like, listen, traditional TV and movies, there's something called a hiatus,
Yeah.
right? Because writers need to write, they need to
Hmm.
figure out strategy, that's it's called a hiatus for that reason.
You
Creators
also
don't get
don't.
that.
Oh yeah, and sorry to trip up your point, but you also don't see a lot of people wanting to do a 22 episode a year, 11-year long show for the same exact reason. Although it's
Or
lucrative.
a net or a
Yeah,
network
same.
that would want to
Yeah.
do it, but that's all based on Nielsen and
Hmm.
ComScore and ratings, which is, we sort of go back to the beginning of it, of like, okay, you're going to pay this much for a commercial on this show that has an estimated rating of these are the
Yes.
demos. How do you measure, which is getting better, but
Hmm.
the ROI on that
Yep.
commercial, but you're going to spend $20 million on the
Hmm.
production plus the ad buy. Oh, by the way, it's geo-locked to the US. Oh, by the way, it's only in this season. And oh, that's just on TV. It's not on streaming, because we're replacing
Hmm.
the ads. So all of this money, and then how do you track the SKUs?
Yeah.
By
Right.
coupon code of like so there's this idea of like trying to force these two worlds together, and they don't mix.
And to bring it full circle, that content exists for longer than 28 days now. So a show could certainly not be watched for a while, and then, all of a sudden it has its Suits moment.
Yep, yep,
And that,
and
you don't
yeah,
know.
you don't know. And the idea behind, and listen, creators have their own issues, right?
Yeah.
They are, they are extremely smart, and nobody can teach you how to be a CEO.
No.
But that's what we're asking all of them to do.
And it's interesting because while they experience some of the same things, it's a completely divergent skill set.
Right.
It has parallels, but it clearly has different things you have to navigate.
Right. And that's why I'm so passionate about, the Shorty Awards, and
Yeah.
working with brands and agencies and different companies, is because there are some amazing companies that deserve the spotlight for doing really, really great work on
Yeah.
telling stories, on elevating um, celebrating the human spirit, and while making money,
Hmm.
um, and getting to be part of a organization where I get to be connected with these amazing creative individuals. Um, how cool is that?
It's
and and
incredibly
and
cool.
and hopefully being able to help those organizations make more money and have a better story to tell, not only internally, but with the creators that they want to work with. Because the creators want to work with brands. They want to, and brands want to work with creators. It's just the communication, and that's where I sit in the middle of it, and try to support as much as I can, because this is a industry that is full of creatives, and
I think it gives you
creators need support.
and I think it gives you an incredibly unique perspective on how to kind of navigate that, right? And understand it. When you can understand things from both perspectives, I've always thought it's a strategic advantage in PR when I'm like, but I can understand the creator and I can
Yeah.
understand what those needs might be. So let's keep those in mind, and maybe we don't just give them a Yeti cup.
Right. And by the way, they're not always right. Creators are not always right. Let me just be really, really clear. There are plenty of times it's like, nope.
Well, and just like sometimes your style does not mesh with a brand too, right? Because like if you have a very much click rate and subscribe style, but that doesn't really
Yep.
fit the brand, it's hard to a lot of it's matchmaking, right? But one of the things I was thinking about before we close is that for somebody who like reads Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Work Week, it's amazing, right? And it's awesome, and it's ideal. But if you think in terms of a creator, right, it might look like a 4 hour work week, but you are always on. You are always available. You are always accessible. In order to keep that whole thing moving, you have to be engaging with people. So while it might look glamorous and easy and fun, and you could have, even if you build it in your own image as best as possible to fit you the best, there are curveballs, there are a bunch of things that come your way that will derail that, right? And so yeah, that's the burnout part of it, is that it's not the stuff that you're putting out, it's everything that's coming in that you're not, and yes, what did you do for me yesterday?
Right. And it's there is no control.
No.
It's I'm putting a piece of myself out into the world, and I don't have any control over if it's going to be if it's going to take off.
Yeah.
And when people blame the algorithm, I just stop them, and I go, listen, let's just break it down and be really, really clear. It's a bunch of zeros and ones. It has no feelings. It may soon with AI, but we'll see. But its job is to find content to keep the viewer on the
Yes.
platform for as long as possible, to serve as many ads as possible. Period.
Yes.
End of sentence.
Beautiful explanation of the attention economy.
Like,
absolutely.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I said, so the idea that you have an artist or a creator who's putting a piece of themselves out there, which if you haven't put a piece out, it's petrifying and incredibly vulnerable. And then you give it up to the gods that you have no control over.
Yes.
And then you're expected to perform KPIs. And if that video didn't do well, guess what? We don't want to work with you again.
Yep.
But show up the next day with a smile. So it is there is a if we understand the lack of control that a creator has in putting their content up, you can see why they hold on to things so tightly.
Absolutely.
And I say this to all of my clients, I said, you're going to be relevant online for X amount of time, and we don't know what the end is going to be, but it will come.
Yes.
So my job is to help elongate that and create different kinds of revenue and different
Mm-hmm.
kinds of income and to help build your business. So
Yes.
if one of those pillars drops, you still have a an income. Because the thing is, and I've seen this, and no one talks about this. The most successful creators that I've ever had the honor of meeting and working with are the ones that never wanted to be famous, never cared about making money. They just had a thing that they put off up and it took off.
Yeah.
The creators who will reach out to me, who will say, "Hey, I want to be famous and I want to do this." There's a few of them that have made it,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, that's a very easy gauge. It is usually the people who had no idea that this was going to happen, and then now they're in a space where they never wanted to be.
Yeah. They were just focused on the content and making it good.
Right. And so now all of a sudden they're dealing with all of this other stuff. And what a great way to supplement, to bring in income, to build relationships with brands. Like
Yeah.
it is perfect. It is great. And I think if brands can understand where a creator is coming from, not to make excuses, and a creator can understand where brands are coming from, then you then the magic starts and the content gets better and better and the relationship gets better
Mm-hmm.
and more the money comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the responsibility of people in our industry on either side to just be really upfront about it.
Yeah. When you were talking about that and those expectations, I have not talked about this on the podcast, but I was in the very real scenario of this video needs to hit 6 million views. Are you going to hit
Mm-hmm.
it? I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Right.
I
Otherwise,
did it, but like, very early in my career, like, was not smart enough or not experienced enough or seasoned enough to know better. So it was like, yeah, okay, sure, we
yeah,
can do
but
that.
how stressed were you, Jeff? How
Insane. I'm feeling
petrified
it
were
right now.
you?
I'm like, it's like I'm re-experiencing it right now when you're talking about it. Like that's why I wanted to bring it up because that is, oh, that's terror. And then you feel it on the other end. So like I'm doing a Webby nominated campaign,
Yeah.
not knowing that at the time, involving, predictive analytics and AI. And, this is getting launched during March Madness and hoping it hits and does what it needs to do. So then I'm like feeling it from the brand side in reverse and going, oh, okay. So now I'm on the other side of like, I need you to hit these views.
Right.
So it comes full circle. Yeah.
Right. Well, paid dollars, because the idea behind, and I wish more creators got to have a day in the life of being at an AOR or a brand, and vice versa,
Yes.
because that is one of the best things that ever happened at YouTube Nation was from we had 40 people working on this show, and it was a daily show. And one of the best leadership exercises that I've ever seen was that they had our bosses had set up the EPs had set up every week one department would share the entire process of their workflow. And I was like, why am I wasting my time listening to this? What like we were all confused. And then it hit, which was we were so siloed.
Mm.
Every organization is so siloed, and even creators that work are so siloed that they don't understand all the different steps that it
Yes.
takes to make something. So when we did this at YouTube Nation, a lot of frustration dropped, and a lot of compassion came through, because it was like, oh, I didn't realize that when I need this from you, these are the 15 different things that you need to do. And so it sort of shattered those silos.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that if there can be more of that, and that's why I'm saying sort of switch places, because creators can then understand what the brands are up against, and brands can try and put themselves in a creator's position and be like, okay, how do we approach this differently to make sure that the story is told in the most compelling way, that as many people as possible believe in our brand? Because you can sell a SKU, you can sell 10 SKUs, 20, 1,000, great.
Yeah.
But I've not met one brand or one executive that would trade, a 10,000 SKUs versus 10,000 people with brand loyalty or brand affinity, or even knowing the brand's name.
Mm-hmm.
Way more valuable. But how do you measure that monetarily? How do you measure that? And
Comes
so
full circle.
this is the I think one of the big issues that we see, because the communication styles just aren't there, and they may not translate. But if we're able to talk on both sides and try and explain it to one another, and I've been lucky enough to be in these kind of meetings. The creator goes, oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, then I'll just give you another round. What do you think about this? And the brand's going to go, oh, we didn't realize you were working that hard. Do you need an extra day or two? Or like,
Mm-hmm.
is there anyone from our team that can help you?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, they've actually created a mini production team, and
Mm-hmm.
the piece that goes out is so much better, and it works. But it takes people in the middle that understand the languages on both sides.
Yes.
And that's sort of where I sit, is trying to help both sides understand each other, not because either one doesn't want to understand, but because there's so much value on each side that
Mm-hmm.
the connection is too valuable to ignore.
And that's why there was a dramatic pause over lunch, because of that white space. Yeah, integrated relationships are just better. Josh, when I close these, I do something called Keep It Short. It is 3 questions. The questions are short. Your answers can be as ever long as you would like them to be.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. First question. Moment you actually realized in the moment it was pivotal in your career.
Which part? What was pivotal?
I will rephrase and edit.
Yeah.
Question. I'll actually ask a different question. Question number 1. What do you think has been the most beneficial skill, trait, thought process, ability you have brought to your career?
Listening.
Yeah. Is it a muscle?
Yeah, and it's one that I've had to work a lot on, because I like talking. And your editor is gonna know this in the podcast. But listening without thinking in your head about the response, because most of the time we're listening to someone, but we're not really listening, because it's always like, oh yeah, me too. Oh yeah, I did this.
Mm-hmm.
And so the most valuable skill that I've honed is actually paying full attention and silencing my thoughts, so I can just be present with the person and actually hear them.
And I think one of the most universally great traits of anybody that I encounter or I meet or comes on this podcast is the person, this is not even related to listening. It is and it isn't. But it's the person who, for that 45 minutes or hour or 10 minutes or 5, that's the most important thing to them at that moment. If they can possess that, that's maybe my number one predictor of success. Just being in the moment. Tough. And you kind of talk about, listening because we're listening to relate. We're listening to adapt. We're listening to, create connection, right? But yeah, we're not always listening to help or to hear other things or counter or, tell people inconvenient or hard truths. We're just usually there to be like, yes, also me.
Right. And I think that's the hardest thing to do, is to let go of that, and to be present in the moment. Because listen, it's not about me. It's about my client.
Yeah. It was weird when I was pitching this podcast. I was like, okay, I am a serial talker. I have done nothing but talk my entire life. I would like to now listen to people.
Yeah.
Do you think I can do it? It's a work in progress.
I thought you were asking me. I was like, well, I mean, you're in episode.
No,
you're in a good. I was like, you're doing it, man. Good job.
Thank you. That was not designed for praise. I will take it, but it was more so like I had to think about that. How am I going to change to break the fourth wall? Again, full circle moment. I had to think, how do I listen to be intentional in this podcast? But I also have to keep the conversation moving. So I have to kind of navigate both spaces of sometimes, and one of the things I fell on was the willingness to sometimes not have the perfect question next. Because that way, at least I have allowed a person the space to tell exactly their unique story. And cool, we'll fix it in post. Josh, question number 2.
Right.
Your best advice, and again, this is tough because no advice is universal, and it really can vary depending on a variety of factors. But your best advice specifically for creators on navigating that first instantaneous moment of attention and what to do next.
When that happens, and when things start to take off, keep the friends that were around you before you were famous.
Mm-hmm.
And it is totally normal to be scared and to not know what to do. And that they're in a situation that not many people in the world will ever be in. And that's okay.
Yeah. Question number 3. Where are you 10 years from now?
That's a good coaching question, Jeff.
It's a question I've asked before, but it was a question I was like, I have to ask this one.
Where am I in 10 years from now? Yeah, I'm going to have to bring out my own strategic plan on this one and look, but it's only 5 years because I don't do it
5
10
is
years.
fine.
But I see creator coach and myself continuing to work with organizations and individuals that really make a difference in this world, and not always through story, but making sure that the brand creator coach, and that I'm always learning and staying humble, and continuing to grow my organization to help as many people as possible, and helping a lot of people that don't have access to coaching.
Yeah. And just like AI, the more you are existing in both of these spaces, the deeper the insights will be.
Yeah, and I think that I would say the other piece that I just want to stress is to anybody listening, you're not alone. And that's also where I see myself in 10 years, is continuing to break more vacuums, taking the and getting oxygen into places for people to get perspective and awareness. I'm not one of those coaches who's like, live your best life, 10x your like, that's just like good for you, but like that's more motivational speaking, and I've done it and it's great, but that's not, I'm not interested in that. That's where I can tell you where I won't be is doing things that are action oriented and not awareness oriented. And so I see myself 10 years from now being even more entrenched in different industries and different organizations around the world, and connecting them and having them build businesses and make money. Now, money doesn't make you happy; it makes things easier. And sort of just turning the volume up on the amount of people that I get to help.
I love it. Josh, thank you so much for joining.
You got it. My pleasure.